Welcome to this week's episode of Weather Extra. I'm First Alert Meteorologist Jillian Johnson. Last week was abnormally wet and cool for us in Central Texas. For a deeper dive on how unusual this weather pattern was, we bring in First Alert Meteorologist Sean Bellafiore to kick off this week's show. Sean.
I hope you've been enjoying this stretch of cooler and rainier than normal conditions for the past couple of days. It is rarefied air that we see, not only the cool weather that we saw, but also how long this cool weather has lasted. These are the high temperatures from July 19th to July 25th. On July 22nd, our average high went from 97 to 98 degrees, which is the highest average high temperature we get all year long. But that 3-day stretch of time, the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd, was very abnormal. Not only abnormal, of course, because of the cooler than normal temperatures, but it was the first 3-day stretch of sub 90-degree highs in July since July 17th, 18th, and 19th, 2014. It's been 10 years since we've had this long of a cool stretch in the month of July. And of course, we have not really set records, but we've come close to them. It was the third coolest July 22nd at 84 degrees. July 22nd was also the coolest July day since July 9th, 2021. And that 3-day stretch of time is the 13th coolest 3-day stretch over the last 24 years. One thing we haven't seen a lot of is, of course, the triple digits this year. Only 3 100-degree days through July 31st, as long as our forecast holds up, of course. 2023, we had 28 100-degree days through July 31st, and 2022, we were at 47 triple-digit days. Now, of course, we're entering into August. This is still the hottest time frame of the year, so those triple digits may make a return. But as far as morning temperatures go, we're not nearly quite as drastic of a difference from normal. Yeah, there have been a lot of cooler than normal mornings, and especially for the past couple of days, but we've stayed mostly in the 70s thanks to a lot of the moisture that is in place. So the average low temperature doesn't even crack the top 10 list. 26, lowest average low temperature through the 26. Reporting in the studio, Sean Bellafiore, KWTX News 10.
As we close out July and head into August, we are in the hottest time of the year here in Central Texas. The start of the month, it kicks off with a normal high of 98 degrees, which is the hottest average high we have all year long. But by the middle of the month, we start to see our normals drop as we inch closer and closer to fall. And by the end of the month, our average high is 95 degrees. Now, the hottest temperature ever recorded throughout the month of August was 112 degrees, which happened back on August 11th of 1969. And the coldest temperature was 53 back in 1992 on August 28th. Although we saw slightly wetter than normal conditions throughout the month of July, July is technically the driest month that Central Texas has all year long. August follows right behind July as the second driest month of the year. On average, 2.05 inches of rain is supposed to fall throughout the 31 days of August. Now, the wettest August ever was back in 2008 when over 10 inches of rain fell at the Waco Regional Airport. And this past Monday, July 22nd, was the hottest day in world history, breaking the previous record set just the day before. That's according to the latest data from the Copernicus Climate Change Service. The preliminary data comes from the climate tracking agency monitoring Earth's temperature since the mid-1900s. It's the second consecutive year average global temperatures have smashed climate records for heat. Scientists pegged last year's records to the warming El Niño climate pattern and rising levels of pollution. This year's record comes as El Niño is disappearing and transitioning to its cooler La Nina phase. Well, the Paris Olympics officially kicked off on Friday, and organizers have one major concern for this year's games: the heat. CNN meteorologist Derek Van Dam is in Paris and has more on what local meteorologists are using to keep the athletes and those that come to watch the games safe.
The Olympics are about to kick off in Europe's most vulnerable city to heat. Extreme weather fueled by increasing temperatures may be one of the event organizers' toughest challenges.
While rain could postpone the events, heat waves threaten spectators and athletes in the city. This device detects heat using infrared. The yellows are the hottest, the purples are the coolest, something meteorologists will be watching closely.
CNN spoke exclusively with a meteorologist responsible for monitoring incoming severe weather and advising the Olympic Committee on potential impacts.
So we have something I can show you here. We have really hot summers that we never had before the 21st centuries in Paris.
This year's games will take place around the same period of the year as France's most lethal heat wave in 2003.
It was the worst event we had in France overall, and especially in Paris here. Paris is vulnerable because we have a very big urban heat effect.
Because Paris is such a densely populated city, heat is amplified by various surfaces like asphalt, concrete, and even buildings. While Olympic athletes strive to break records, our own planet is breaking records too, as 2023 was Earth's hottest year ever, with 2024 on track to be even warmer.
And what I see is a concerning trend of more frequent extreme heat and longer lasting heat.
While extreme heat is just one element monitored here, forecasters from Meteo France will use an arsenal of tools to warn of any incoming severe weather.
It's like rain detection at street level.
This little-known device could determine whether or not an Olympic event is postponed or canceled. It is the mobile radar that measures rain in real time, so Meteo France forecasters can advise the Olympic Committee.
If the threshold for a given sport is exceeded, postponement or calendar adaptation or the worst cancellation could happen.
Heavy rain already postponed an opening ceremony rehearsal on the Seine as the river was flowing too quickly. The last time Paris hosted the Olympics in 1924, the French capital was 5.5 degrees cooler than it is today, helping fuel the climate with more extreme weather. 2024 is certainly on track to rewrite both the climate and Olympic history books. Derek Van Dam, CNN, Paris.
Take a look at these images. People in central Paris were given a celestial treat this past Monday, July 22nd, when the full moon passed right through the Olympic rings on the Eiffel Tower. The 29 by 13 meter construction made of recycled steel was installed last month on the south side of Paris's iconic monument. The Eiffel Tower will be center stage at the Olympics this year, with the opening ceremony happening on the Seine, which passes at the tower's feet, and the beach volleyball competitions held at the feet of the Iron Lady. Another fun note, pieces of steel taken from the Eiffel Tower have also been used to be part of the Paris 2024 medals. The Paris Olympics is taking place now through August 11th. One of the other major weather stories from this past week has been the devastating wildfires that have been burning through parts of the United States and Canada. Throughout the past week, multiple western states were under air quality alerts due to wildfires like the one you see on your screen right now. The National Interagency Fire Center says about 90 wildfires were burning out once across the country throughout last week. They also stated that those wildfires have burned over 1 million acres and some are still growing in size. 9 U.S. states reported large active wildfires last week, with the Pacific Northwest region being one of the hardest impacted regions, as at least 20 fires are burning in Oregon and 12 in California. Evacuation orders were put in place in those hard-hit areas. Numerous homes and businesses burned to the ground. And take a look at this devastating view of a burned forest in Jasper, Alberta, Canada. This was the view shot by one local who was forced to flee. Numerous out-of-control fires have forced some 25,000 people to evacuate out of the Canadian Rockies' largest national park. At one point last week, there were 170 wildfires burning in Alberta and another 375 in neighboring British Columbia. And local law enforcement stated that nearly 275 of those fires were considered out of control, warning that the situation could worsen as weather conditions have not been in favor of stopping the fires. And because of those wildfires, air quality in some western states have been ranked as some of the worst in the world last week, Denver, Colorado being one of those places. Last Tuesday, Denver's air quality had the ranking of 9th worst air quality among major cities globally. Wildfire smoke from those wildfires that you just saw across Canada and parts of the Pacific Northwest impacted states like Colorado. Reduced visibility and poor air quality was captured across the northern and central plains and even as far east as some of the Great Lakes states. Up next on Weather Extra, we head to Oklahoma, to areas that were hit with destructive tornadoes earlier this year. We'll have more on how those impacted are still recovering after the immediate help and attention fades. We'll have some of the survivor stories when we come back. Welcome back to Weather Extra. This year's tornado season is on track to be the third busiest ever. In addition to the $28 billion in damage and the more than 40 people killed so far this year, there's an immeasurable emotional toll when a community is destroyed. And as CBS's Dave Malkoff reports, the rebuild unfolds after all the attention fades.
You think we can do it?
Yes.
This is what Bartlesville, Oklahoma has looked like for the past 2.5 months since a powerful tornado ripped through here.
Our family didn't get hurt, but it's kind of sad to know that other families did get hurt also. They got hurt really bad.
And 8-year-old River Garrett had to grow up quick.
I was in tears, because I didn't expect this much damage.
Your life is a little bit different now than it was before.
It doesn't even feel like the same place, and I say it to myself, that I can't make this about me.
All the news crews are now long gone. River and his grandmother, Jimmy Blake, and the rest of the folks in Bartlesville are trying to put what they can back together.
This was part of the wall in the office building.
Oh, yeah.
The tornado did this to their home, powerful enough to blow a family photo with River's grandmother in it 21 miles away to Danny Lemon's cow pastures.
So this is it?
Yep. There's a bunch of plywood and insulation laying around. I told my wife, I said, I know who these people are.
So far this year, there have been more than 1,000 reports of tornadoes in this nation. Meteorologists rate these tornadoes on a scale that goes from 0 to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The one that hit here was near the top of that scale, winds up to 200 miles an hour.
Yes, this is where we build instruments and we put them onto vehicles so we can go out in the field and study storms.
Harold Brooks studies severe storms for the National Weather Service.
I think when people see these tornadoes, they think that at some point the buildings are going to get just reconstructed.
There are small towns that have been almost destroyed completely by tornadoes that essentially never rebuild because it's just hard to recover when there's no infrastructure left.
That was our meat processing plant over there. It's gone.
Johnny Kelly is the mayor of Barnsdall, Oklahoma. That tornado in May hit the heart of his community the hardest. 2 people died.
There's 83 homes that are gone. I don't know if there's enough adjectives in the vocabulary to describe this deal.
It seems like there's a short period of time when the eyes of the nation are on your city, but after that, there's still a big need here.
No one's here, and we're left here to deal with what's left. It's an emotional roller coaster for people.
A lot of people came in here and cleaned up, but it's not even half finished.
Do you have one wish for the future?
It's going to take a while to get used to, but I hope this all gets cleaned up and you have a new house.
You want this part to be over like that?
Yeah, to the future, so I don't have to think about it anymore.
You need a time machine.
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
It took 120 years to build this community. It will take some time to rebuild. For Eye on America, Dave Malkoff in Bartlesville, Oklahoma.
Well, just as you heard, it has been a very active year for tornadoes across the country, including for us right here in Central Texas, as we had that destructive tornado tear through Temple back in May. In this week's Degrees of Science, Brady Taylor spoke with a Texas Tech professor about the science behind how tornadoes form. We have a listen into their conversation on the other side of this break. We'll be right back.
Well, this week we're talking with Dr. Johannes Dahl from Texas Tech University. Dr. Dahl, you recently wrote an article in the American Meteorological Society about tornado genesis and how these features form. Step us through some of the steps of actually forming a tornado.
Yeah, so the first step usually is that a rotating thunderstorm, the mesocyclone, develops. But at that point, the storm only spins above the ground and not at the ground. And for the tornado, we need spinning air at the surface. And that's been a problem that people have been working on the past 40 years, basically, trying to understand how does this rotation get to the ground. And so what we need is a downdraft. And you can imagine if you pour milk into water, you can see how there's little eddies at the side of the sinking milk plume. And in thunderstorms, something similar happens. We have air sinking. That's the air that contains all the rain and the hail. And at the edge of this sinking mass of air, we get horizontal spinning motion. And it is that spinning motion that is pushed to the ground and reoriented into the vertical as the air approaches the ground. And so then we have spin at the surface, but that's still not the entire story, because now we have to amplify that spin, which we can do by basically using the ice skater effect, right? You have a little bit of spin, and now you have the updraft above that concentrates the air, and then thereby, like an ice skater that draws their arms together, starts spinning faster. And that is still not the entire story. That's what we thought was basically the explanation. But now it turns out that this vortex interacts with the surface, with the ground. And it turns out that there is an additional way that spin can be generated, which is then rapidly tilted into the vertical at the base of the tornado. So a lot of different steps have to happen. I'm not sure if that's an easy explanation, but that's the current way we think about this.
Why is this part of the, learning how they form and the little bitty details, how much of an impact do you think that'll have moving forward on potential warnings and learning on which storms these tornadoes will form?
Yeah, so many of the warnings are false alarms. There is, in fact, a 70% false alarm ratio of the warnings that are issued by the Weather Service. And so their philosophy is, let's warn one time too many than miss a tornado. And but I think to get this number down, we have to really improve our understanding of how tornadoes form. We need to observe better, which is both pretty hard to do. But the understanding of how tornadoes form is one part of the piece. And oftentimes there's supercell storms right next to each other, and one or two of them are producing a tornado, and the remaining one is not, although they're basically sitting in the same environment. And we really don't know exactly what's going on. And I think having a robust understanding of the basic mechanisms that lead to tornadoes may help eventually to get a better feel for why storms sometimes do and sometimes don't produce tornadoes, although they all kind of live in the same environment. Sometimes one would expect all of them to produce tornadoes.
Yeah, that is definitely a tricky science, like I said, when you're watching it real time. So one aspect you had in your article that I really enjoyed is a lot of times you'll hear people say a tornado touched down. So when we're talking about a tornado forming, does it actually spin up or is it touching down? I think this is really interesting.
Well, theory, simulations, and observations suggest that the wind flow, the swirling air, builds upwards from pretty close to the ground, from the ground upwards. And it's paradoxical because the cloud that accompanies the vortex descends down against the flow direction. So the flow is going upward, and as the flow spins up faster, the funnel cloud keeps descending closer to the ground. But really the airflow is going upwards, and the spin also increases upwards. So usually when you have a tornado, or rather a funnel cloud, that is developing and it's sitting under this rotating mesocyclone, you can be pretty sure that there's already some pretty damaging swirling flows, i.e. a tornado, at the ground.
To hear their full conversation about how tornadoes form, scan the QR code on your screen to watch on YouTube, or you can head over to our website at KWTX.com/degrees of science. Weather Xtra will be right back. Welcome back to Weather Extra. A massive geyser eruption sent tourists running for their lives this past Tuesday at Yellowstone National Park. Here's Seth Ratliff with the story.
A hydrothermal explosion shattered through Yellowstone National Park Tuesday morning. Dramatic video captured by Vlada March shows the moment of the blast, which she describes as a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Vlada and her husband Steven spoke out just hours after the terrifying event.
We kind of went into fight or flight mode. We grabbed our kids, started running, just instinctively trying to get as far as we can from the explosion. And then, moments later, we started to realize the gravity. Holy moly, there's boulders, rocks falling all over us.
The blast occurred in the Biscuit Basin area of the national park, just north of Old Faithful. The March family and Vlada's mother arrived at the basin just before the explosion. During the initial blast, Vlada and her mother were separated.
When we started running the other way, I saw that she started running the the opposite way. So I thought she was fine initially, but that was before that huge explosion fully developed. Once the explosion was over and I saw the damage, then I was really scared actually, but thankfully our tour guide Isaac, he ran back very quickly and he screamed that she's fine.
My mother-in-law was very close to the epicenter, and she ran the other way towards the entrance, and luckily she made it, but she was all covered in ash and silt.
These pictures show the damage left behind from the explosion. You can see the rock and dirt, which did a lot of damage to the boardwalk. Park rangers say no injuries were reported.
You know, very appreciative, very lucky to have gone through this and made it back alive.
In West Yellowstone, Seth Ratliff, Local News 8.
And before we go, take a look at this amazing and frightening moment caught on camera this past Tuesday when a humpback whale suddenly breached the ocean's surface and slammed into a boat, causing it to capsize. It happened off the coast of Portsmouth, New Hampshire. A teen from Maine was fishing nearby with his older brother. 16-year-old Colin Yeager happened to be filming the water when the whale breached. Thankfully, the two men on the capsized boat were able to jump off before it flipped over, leaving nobody injured in the incident. Hopefully you're able to enjoy the cooler and wetter than normal weather that we were gifted with last week, because it's back to regular scheduled programming as we head into the new week. Temperatures will be on the rise throughout this week, so remember to stay hydrated and limit that time outdoors in the sun as much as possible. That's all we have for you on this week's episode of Weather Extra. We'll see you again next weekend.